The United States of America is now technically at war, confirmed by a Twitter post from President Donald J. Trump confirming we have bombed Iranian nuclear sites. And yet in this breaking story, what you're going to maybe want to hear is how Iran has responded to it, because Republican Representative Thomas Massie had this response to Donald J. Trump's post. Breaking news in a post from Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. Just shortly ago, we have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this now. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And please note that Republican Representative Thomas Massie posted in response to that post from Donald J. Trump, "This is not constitutional." And Bernie Sanders said this.
Statement from Donald Trump, quote, "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran," etc.
And NBC News is telling us this.
A full payload of bombs dropped on the primary site. That would, Courtney, imply, at least for all practical purposes, that in order to successfully bomb that site, the United States would have used those Buster bombs that have yet to be utilized on these B-2 bombers.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of detail at this point. Here's a couple things that I would take away from the president's Truth Social. Number one, he said we have completed our very successful. That to me would indicate that this was sort of the bombers went in, or the potentially other aircraft, most likely other aircraft as well, went in here, they conducted this bombing run, and they got out. They've cleared Iranian airspace. That's generally the point at which military officials or the White House, I guess, would release any kind of information once they are clear of that potentially dangerous airspace over Iran. What we don't know is that exactly what was used here. So if we look at some of the factors that we've seen today, we know that some B-2 bombers, a handful of them took off from Whiteman Air Force Base over Missouri. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. That is enough time for them to get to Iran. They have the ability, Jose, to fly extremely long distances. We're talking like 3-day missions, refueling in the air, never actually touching ground.
And yet with Americans in Iran and all of the Iranians that exist inside the U.S. borders, we might want to care about the actual response Iran has to this. Here is the breaking story now.
من هدف مشروع ایران هستند. آمریکا با این اقدامی که انجام داد علیه ایران و حریم هوایی ایران را شکست و جنایت علیه ایران انجام داد، دیگه جایی در منطقه غرب آسیا نداره. آقای رئیس جمهور آمریکا، شما شروع کردید و ما تمومش خواهیم کرد.
I am well aware that this action by us will be deemed in many circles as necessary. It'll be deemed as glorious, victorious, and it will also be deemed as the only action we could take because of the equipment and the technology that we have, the ability to do this based on the bombers and also the particular bombs required to break up something like this concrete site of Iran's. And yet, let us do bear in mind that Donald J. Trump has been told that Iran did not have nuclear capabilities, nor were close to them, and he literally has denied his own Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard's report, much like he denied the IC's intel way back when he agreed with Putin back in his first term regarding the Russian involvement in the election. We don't know the full truth yet, but what we do know is, technically, we just bombed Iran, and Iran is going to likely respond. Here's a little bit more of the NBC report, just so you have further context.
Again, we don't have confirmation that was what was used here, but we have been talking all week about how difficult it would be to actually bomb Fordo. The actual facility sits somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 feet below the surface of the earth, and it's underneath reinforced concrete. Now, the U.S. has these bunker busters you mentioned. They're technically called a massive ordnance penetrator. And what they are these huge, really heavy bombs. They're only about 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of total explosives, but they're about 30,000 pounds in total payload, meaning that the majority of that weight is coming from these really heavy, strong, basically outer casings that have the ability to penetrate deep into the earth about 200 feet down before detonating. Jose, if they really wanted to take out Fordo, it would take a number of these MOPS, or these bunker busters, to just continue to pound at that concrete until they're able to fully break through it. Again, we don't know that that was used, but it makes the most sense. And as we've been saying, it's one of the capabilities that Israel simply does not have. They don't have bombs of this size, and they don't have the aircraft, the B-2, that are able to actually deploy them. One thing I was surprised about this was that the U.S. hit 3 different sites, as we heard from the president here tonight, not just at Fordo that we've been talking about. They also hit Natanz. Israel has already been striking Natanz over the last week plus now, and they also hit Esfahan. Now, the next big question is, well, several questions. One, is the U.S. going to continue? Is this a one and done? Based on the president's statement, he said completed. We'll take that for now as to be this mission right now is completed for the United States. The next question, will Iran respond and how? The biggest concern all along is that Iran, or more likely Iranian proxies, would go after U.S. installations and assets in the region. There's a lot of them right within very close striking distance of Iran. But one thing that the U.S. has going for them, and this is number one, they've started getting some Americans out of there. They started moving some assets around to get them out of harm's way, but also in the last 9 days or so, Israel has really taken out a lot of Iran's conventional capabilities as well, not just going after their nuclear sites. So we're talking about their radars, their launchers, and even some of their ballistic missiles. The third big concern here is, when you're hitting a nuclear site, or 3 of them, is there potential for radioactive material to spill into the ground, to spill into the atmosphere? Jose? I am far from an expert on nuclear material and radioactive material, but I have been reaching out to people who are experts on this. They say that the risk of that at Fordo is expected to be relatively low. James Acton, who's an expert on these sorts of issues, says that the material there is very low in radioactivity anyway at Fordo. And so the risk of it spilling into the atmosphere is low. The same with Natanz. We also heard from the IAEA this week, after those first strikes on Natanz, they said there is very little indication of anything getting out. The big concern here is if they were to hit Bushehr. That's at one of the facilities where there could be some sort of a fallout of radioactive material.
The fact that the president says that this main site was successfully hit, it could only be successfully destroyed by those ordinances that you were referring to. And in a way, they're not only bombs, they're actually almost like drill tips that are able to penetrate deep in the ground and then at a predetermined distance or depth detonate. What are the possibilities that any other ordinance could have been used?
The plans I have heard about have generally included more than just using these massive ordnance penetrators. They've included others as well. The big question is, as the sun starts to come up over Iran in an hour or two, whenever it is will the U.S. or Israel or anyone be able to get any kind of a ground assessment of exactly what happened on the ground, if they were able to, with these bombs, really obliterate everything on the ground and really destroy the facility? Or is there some way that with these bombs that they drop, they can almost make it collapse in on itself, for all intents and purposes, entomb itself underground so that it still would be rendered unusable?
And as I always say, you guys stay frosty.